Hello and welcome to our group share four with the best group in the veterinary social work cohort. Just kidding, everybody's the best. So we're going to begin our session today with a very brief mindfulness exercise. So I'll just ask everybody to find a comfortable position. And comfortable position for you might look different from a comfortable position for anybody else. So I would invite you to pay attention to your experience, your body in this moment, and it might look different from what's comfortable for you yesterday and tomorrow. So find that today sense of maybe feeling into your chair, feeling your feet on the ground, any way you can connect with the weight and density of your own body in your space. And if you feel comfortable closing your eyes, you're invited to do so. If not, maybe try to soften the gaze and sort of expand your seeing into your peripheral vision, which can also help to relax the nervous system. And let yourself arrive here, right? It's not like a switch you can turn on and off. It's absolutely a process. So give yourself some grace here if you're finding it difficult to do a U-turn from go, go, go into stillness. Notice your breathing, breathing in and out. If it feels comfortable for you, you might begin to take a deeper exhale, inhale, a deeper inhale, and then a longer exhale. And let's just take 3 breaths together at your own pace. Intentionally breathing into the lungs and breathing out. When you reach that third breath, if your eyes are closed, you might slowly blink them open, or in some other way allow your attention to rise back up into the room. And then when you feel ready, you can re-enter this call. And we can briefly share any self-care habits or activities that we've been using. Because my dog is squeaking her ball and reminding me that she's there, I'll say I've really been enjoying my walks with her, especially as the weather improves. That's been a really important part of my self-care. And there's no pressure to share. If you want to say skip, skip.
I think I got out of the habit. This is my not self-care, out of the habit of meditating in the morning for 10 minutes. Like I
Mm,
can't 10 minutes. Yeah. Yeah. Thank you. That's a good reminder. Tomorrow, setting my alarm.
that's great.
Self-care for me has been taking a few moments to focus on my breath.
Mm, beautiful. Awesome. Well, thank you for participating in that or engaging with that. I feel better. I hope you feel something. Um, and we're talking about ethical dilemmas in veterinary social work today, and we've each brought sort of a case to look at. And just so we know, we're on coming up on 5 minutes. So let's try as a group to keep ourselves within maybe 10 minutes. Does that sound fair? Okay, cool. And if anybody wants to volunteer to start, please do so, or I can. Okay, let me give you mine.
I was gonna say I'm looking for my document. You go, Alexis. I gotta look up my document. Darn it.
Okay, so I have a client. I don't, this is made up, but I think it's very interesting and I'm excited to talk about it. I have a client who is 67 and she has an animal. She just lost her um 7-year-old dog. Let's say she's a Rottweiler. No, I don't want to say that. Okay, fine, I do. And has used this animal as an emotional support animal. This animal has been like really helpful in managing her mental health, anxiety, depression. This animal was very important to her. Her name was Daisy. And Daisy had some medical complications and that required considerable financial resources on the part of my client who's on Social Security um, and has like a small retirement. So they have a fixed income and they use a lot of their savings at Daisy's end of life care. And I'm seeing my client, let's call her Sally, as I'm seeing Sally because of she wants to work on her grief over the loss of Daisy. So the dilemma, all of that is fairly standard. The dilemma comes in because Sally uh, has just lost Daisy 6 weeks ago, and she wants to, in our sessions, I'm watching her sort of try to skip over the grief work and go right into getting a new animal. And this could be problematic for a couple of reasons. Um, One, I'm noticing that skipping over the grief work doesn't mean the grief goes away. It just means it gets suppressed. And so that's what Sally wants to work on with me. That's what she said her intended goal was. But now that we're in session, I can see that she's really trying to skip past that. The second thing is that getting a new animal right before Sally properly grieves Daisy might impede her bonding with her next animal, and that might not be like the quick fix that she thinks it's going to be. She also has depleted her savings, and we're not sure if she can adequately has the resources to care for this animal in a way that makes Sally's life good and the animal's life good. And then third is the fact that, oh shoot, I forgot my third one. Okay, maybe we can all talk. Maybe you have one that came forward. So the real conundrum here is how do I do the most good and the least amount of harm? And I really want to support Sally's right to self-determination. That's extremely important to me that she has autonomy. However, I do see that there are some real potentials for harm if I just allow Sally, allow is a funny word. If I don't voice reservations about Sally's plan for herself. So I also have a bias here, which is that I have lost an animal. And I noticed when I lost my dog that I had a very concrete reaction to I have this sort of unspoken rule in me that is like you don't get a replacement animal right away. That like diminishes the memory of your previous animal. It's in me. I don't know where it came from, but I'm very aware that I have it. So that's coming up. And I have three approaches to this problem. One of which is I respect self-determination above all. I let Sally go forward and encourage her in her plan. The second way is on the other spectrum of this, in which I voice my concerns, and sort of set them up as like you're not the well-being for the animal, right? If I'm saying this future animal, you might not be able to bond or care for as much as I want you to. And then the third way is I think of it as the middle path, which is trying to see if Sally will agree to sort of explore um, some negatives and positives of pursuing the path together. And I want to, oh, I know. I wanted the third thing that came up is if I challenge Sally about getting this new animal. I don't want, I feel like something that is also important to me is to keep her in the therapeutic relationship, to keep our trust together, and to keep her seeing someone. Even if she does choose this path, I think it would be more helpful if I could be there to offer her resources should she encounter obstacles.
So the therapeutic relationship, like keeping that a positive therapeutic relationship no matter what.
Yeah, yeah. So
Right.
I see that as another issue.
Mm.
Did anything come up for you as I was?
Lots for me. I just did my 615 paper on a grief intervention for kids that I'm
Uh-huh.
developing for in sort of real life as a project. Um, and learning a little bit more about grief and that it isn't like this linear process, but this sort of like it almost feels like a little bit of whack-a-mole.
Mm,
You'd be going along fine, and then I think you go through the different stages.
yeah.
I do love how you laid this out in terms of like what are all my options? And then the fact that you circle back to this really one of the primary things, which is maintaining that therapeutic relationship for her as sort of a guiding principle, I guess I feel like looking at those three, which is, self-determination, just kind of go down the path she's heading down, it sounds like. The second one is the well-being of the animal. Will she have enough money, time, effort to care for the animal?
Right.
Um, and that third path of, I feel like is the most ethical and I mean, just in terms of like, I think Michael and I were just talking before the call about as a veterinary social worker, your client, I mean, like if we look at the social workers, can you guys see my screen? I don't know if you can see.
Yes.
But
Yeah.
if you look at this and you weren't a veterinary social worker, you would just focus on that client, I feel like. But now I feel like the VSW perspective says, well, first and foremost is the human animal bond, right?
Yes.
Prioritizing that.
Yeah.
And maybe this third kind of way, exploring the negative positives, is a way that you can softly go down that path, if you know what I mean.
I
And
do.
say, because the other animal was really her emotional support animal in so many ways, um, explore the notion of that and what's underneath it, like what is behind that. And is it her fear that she's going to fall apart if she doesn't get an animal really quickly? Like,
Yeah.
I wonder if like you come at it, I guess it'd be kind of like this,
Yeah.
really from the fact that you see this as you're having to live without her and that's causing fear and you really want to quit. Is that it? Like explore that? I don't know. I have to think about this a minute.
Oh, Robin, I think that's a wonderful way to frame that. I think that's extremely helpful. It to me that adds sort of adds like bullet points underneath that middle path. It's like, okay, we can explore pros and cons and we can talk
Right.
about like, we're at a really interesting point right now where we might be able to look at what's underneath this, what's guiding this choice, right? Like before we make the choice, let's look at what's guiding it. Yeah, I love that. Thank you.
And I guess in a way, I mean that's gives her sort of that autonomy and that back to that self-determination of I mean, our job is just to really sort of lay out all the, I mean, at the end of the day, I keep thinking we have to have the right answer for our clients, but at the
Mm,
it's really providing them information and awareness, I guess it would be, to make decisions that strengthen and empower them and improve their mental health and well-being. And
yeah.
I think that third one, before I would have thought, oh, that's just a cop out, or like there's got to be an answer, but it is
Yeah.
actually that is the answer.
Mm,
I know, I think that is the answer, that third way. You're really setting her up to explore those. Why does she want one right away? And then what will happen once she gets or has this dog and now has the financial and time and all that commitment.
yeah. I also think I'm looking at it on the screen, but it brings up informed consent too, right? Because you're kind of saying, let's partner with this. Like let's come to an agreement about how we're going to proceed. And I feel like the second or the middle path, it is the third option, but I keep calling it the middle path, is the one that brings that into the partnership the most, right? Because the one this way of just like let her do like support her doing whatever she wants and don't bring any objections in is not actually bringing her into the therapeutic
Mm-mm.
process of planning, right? She's not, I'm not engaging her in her own treatment planning. I'm making a decision without having that conversation. And the same with the raise the objections and try to dissuade her from getting an animal. But the third option says, okay, let's really talk about this and let's come to an agreement about how together we can proceed.
Yeah.
So we're coming up on 10 minutes. I don't know, Michael, if you want to add anything or if you feel comfortable moving on. I know this is very quick and I apologize for that.
I'm cool with moving on.
Thank you. Thank you. Okay, who wants to go next? Thank you. My recommended resolutions, I'm looking at our chart here and I feel like I'm confident of which way to go. Thank you.
And that's a real life scenario. I mean, that is such a real life scenario that I'm seeing,
Oh, I
uh,
bet.
like in my field placement
Mhm.
about, people whose dogs pass and then straight away. But again, it's not really should I get the dog or not? It's about what's driving that need to want to do that. So I
Yeah.
have to remember to dig for that.
Yeah. Robin, I would love to hear about your case if you're ready to talk.
Yeah.
I'm
So
It's
let
very
me
interesting.
let me pull this up real quick. Can you see it? I don't know if I'm sharing the right screen
Yeah,
now.
you're doing a great job. Now I see the ethics page from NASW.
All
Now
right.
I see your
Can you see?
document.
Yeah. So just real briefly, so my ethical dilemma, which at the end of the day, the process of going through this works to really, for me, I'm skipping to sort of the answer, but to me,
Yeah.
I would, oh, this is so murky and ethics are so hard, but really distilling it, and I use that YouTube video um,
Mm-hmm.
that they had laid out how to look at this. Um, which I found another better way, and I'll share that later. But so this is a scenario in which a client comes in the veterinary clinic, comes in to get, we have a pet food pantry, not as extravagant as the Cuyahoga County one, but comes in to get the pet food. And the client is talking about to the veterinary technician about, and just in passing, didn't have an appointment or anything. Hey, I had this hippo mom. She had 10 puppies, labored over the course of 4 days. The mom and all of the puppies died. So the conversation turns to how he has been a breeder of dogs for since he was 13 for years. He moved up here from the South, from Alabama, and he knows how to do this. And so the concept, so that's the facts. So then the YouTube video, I tried to use like that framework,
Mm-hmm.
laying out all the different concepts. So number one, it's not clear why he shared the story. It wasn't like a vet visit. It was just a pet food pickup kind of thing.
Yeah.
Uh, but then it appeared to be more like he was information seeking because he was asking us some questions in regards to that. The follow-on questions are, because he had mentioned he's been doing this since he was 13. He was probably in his late 30s, I would
Mm-hmm.
say. So a long time. Um, the follow-on questions that I would have asked it had it been my client, is this dog part of a regular breeding program? Is this, are you breeding for like traits? Like some breeders breed for certain traits, for certain features, appearances, whatnot. Um, and then maybe that was the concern about the cause of death, if it was like a hereditary thing. Like there, sometimes when you mix, the hereditary things are really end up to be really bad defects, like heart defects. Um, were the dogs being bred for a local sale? Again, what was the purpose? So the ethical dilemma that I wonder is and again, this wasn't my client, but the veterinary technician that was waiting on him, do they have a duty? Is it an ethics issue? Do they have a duty? And again, our sort of duty um, to report that that dog, one, passed away, that it really goes to the animal welfare of the dog that it was allowed to labor for 4 days. Because essentially, it's my understanding that 24 hours is the outside limit. Like
Yeah.
anything beyond that is not quote normal, or there needs to be like an intervention.
Yeah.
Uh, so, did that vet tech have a duty to report? The issue is, again, the dog suffered over the course of 4 days. Obviously, the outcomes were poor. The dog and all the puppies died. So I was trying to figure out how to resolve this. And I looked at all the different frameworks, and I'm really struggling because, again, our client is both the client and the dog and the welfare of the animal and the welfare of the person and self-determination, because I keep coming back to that self-determination. And what this made me do, this sort of resolve framework, was to say, sort of what's the framework that you're looking at this through. And I went to the deontological framework. I remember this from my ethics class in last year. It speaks really to people's intentions, and this is whether one intends to act in a moral way. So applying it to this case, did the dog owner intend to act in a moral way? Even though he saw the dog was in distress and for whatever reason did not bring it to the veterinary clinic. And really the code of ethics, the social workers code of ethics, are based in part on this framework. And then applying, the VSW principles, which is that really valuing that human animal bond. So I started to get myself all up in knots, right? And then I was
Yeah.
like, okay, so what's the law?
Mm.
So I looked at the law that says Ohio Revised Code says veterinary professionals are required to report suspected abuse or neglect. Then I looked at the city of Cleveland, like their statute about cruelty and all of that. So essentially, no person who owns or keeps an animal shall fail to provide with necessary veterinary care. One could argue in this case that beyond 24 hours that was necessary medical care.
Hmm.
Then the question, then the question becomes, and I didn't really go down this path too much. I looked up to see if other states had this. Like if the dog is already deceased, right? So there's no longer a dog present, the abuse isn't present, the abuse or neglect is not present. Is there still a duty to report? And that's not where it's really very clear.
Yeah.
Because now this is after the fact and there's no dog. You know what I'm saying? So
Right.
maybe you can kind of help me work through that. Then I kind of was like, okay, this is all resolved. Then I was like, oh no. So I back up the train, right? And I look at it through the sort of self-determination. And then I'm going to split screen here real quick. If we're going down to here, right? And we're looking at, sorry if I'm giving you a headache. So if we're looking at cultural competence, right?
Totally.
So I'm looking at this, and then I do some research on culturally, right? So cultural considerations. So dog fighting, animal fighting, cockfighting, all of this has a lot of roots in both the deep south and in urban cultures. Why? Because it is literally a way that males could display masculinity, power, and violence, right? So this is us saying, so we've completely emasculated Black men, we've taken away all their rights, and why, they need a way in which to then, again, self-determination, to feel like they have power and control over their own, agency over their own being. And then I started getting really kind of like, okay, like I understand where this is coming from, but still,
Hmm.
still the animal, the welfare of the animal.
Hmm.
Went back to the beginning and said, this is the culture that they grew up in. Like, this is the literal culture.
Right.
And then to further muddy the waters, you guys are going to love this. Um, so I am a 4-H advisor. I teach kids how to raise livestock for production.
Right.
So people could look at what I do, and they do. We have PETA, they come, and they say, you're teaching kids how to kill animals.
Hmm.
So what I do is I'm teaching kids how to, say, raise cattle or turkeys or chickens for food. How is that, how is that different? the animal will, they won't suffer if it's done in a humane way, but a lot of cattle, a lot of livestock aren't really raised in humane conditions, right? They're put in feedlots, they're not given access to fresh, water, air, food, whatever. But so then I really started getting tangled up, which is I'm going to struggle with ethics in this forever because I get myself caught in this circular loop.
Yeah. Time check, we've got about 2 minutes left.
But so at the end of the day, I came back to this, even if using a different ethical framework, not sort of this deontological and like what's the real intent. Um, I come back to even if you're using this sort of cultural ethics and even virtue ethics,
Yeah.
we can acknowledge that that's a cultural tradition, comma, and say, we now recognize animals as more sentient beings that have feelings, and we should respect that and not torture them through fighting.
Yeah.
So it's a hot mess, and I just feel like I'll always struggle with ethics. But this framework, which I've never used before in that YouTube, it did kind of help me parse it out a little better in terms of like, what are the facts, what are the concepts around it, the ethical dilemma, the issue, and then the law.
Hmm.
But then it kind of gets muddied by if we are social workers and we are taking into cultural competence, understanding, is there a way you can understand both how this arose, right?
Yeah.
And the systemic racism and oppression that kept Black men down, and is there a way then you can protect the dog? Because this is, in my opinion, this is clearly his livelihood.
Yeah. Yeah. I think you raise excellent points. I'm gonna open this up for comment now, just in these last few minutes, and I'll start with my comment, which is I think this is extra tricky because this is not a client, right?
It was not my client. Yes.
Yeah. And it actually isn't that vet tech's client either. It's a person who's frequenting a pet pantry. So that doesn't make them a client. You know what I'm
Well,
saying?
they're technically a client because in order to get any services from this organization, you have to be a member. And
Oh,
the way you
interesting.
qualify, you only
Okay.
qualify for membership if you have one of like the 6 or 7 different federal government programs like SSI, SNAP, WIC,
But like
such.
did they sign informed consent and like all that kind of stuff?
Right. So it's a hot mess, right? Because
Yeah.
it's not like a social. I guess at the end of the day, I guess it's frustrating because like a veterinary social worker can't work in that environment successfully.
Mm.
You see what I'm saying? Because
Yeah,
it's
for sure.
like they're a client from the social work perspective.
Yeah.
They come as a pair, the animals and the people come as a pair into this
Yeah.
organization. And I don't know how you could maximize social work principles and animal welfare at the same time in this particular scenario and in many of these situations. And even
Yeah.
in your situation, right? Because if you maximize her welfare, she's thinking, I need this dog, I need this dog. But then if you maximize the animal's welfare, you're like,
Yeah, yeah, but I see a way in the middle where you can compromise with my case. Your case is a hot mess. However,
I
however,
agree.
I would use the same approach, and maybe this is me how I approach maybe more things than I think, which is okay, how can this be like a win-win? Which is I would try to court this person, this frequenter of the pet pantry. I would try to develop a relationship of trust where maybe I don't say, okay, you have to stop dog breeding, but maybe I can start to plant seeds of like um, this is if you enter that situation again, you can use our clinic resources to help to like ask for help and we can come help you. Right? So I don't know if I can do anything about what already happened, but I think that my sort of like energy would be directed to like how do I find a way to make this organization trustworthy enough to this person where
Mm,
if his animals are in danger in the future, he will trust us to help them.
that's interesting because that could have happened. That could have happened, but what happened instead was that person took the no road, was like, that ain't happening on my watch.
Yeah.
Like, do you know what I'm saying? It
Of
didn't
course
lead
I do.
things
But they're a
forward.
vet tech, right? They're not a VSW. I remember having this conversation with you when it happened, Robin.
Yeah, yeah. It's just I've struggled with it now for a couple weeks, and
Yeah.
I wonder in that scenario how, and in reflection again, Michael, like later I think of the thing, right? But the bridge building and the trust to say if you're coming up upon that situation, or even maybe even saying, hey, we have a new program we're going to roll out, and it really is focused on, healthy breeding and sale of dogs or whatever.
Totally, Robin. That's so
Yeah,
smart. That's a beautiful resolution. I also want to say that, like, us even role playing these scenarios is and bringing these from last time and planning what would we do in this is a way of learning so that when are
yeah,
confronted with anything similar in the future, you
yeah.
do have a kind of a back pocket of like prepared
Yeah.
intervention.
Instead of like the hot, like your first knee jerk reaction is, oh, this is a hot mess,
Yeah,
like, right?
and we
Uh,
don't like complicated things. Humans don't. So like our first instinct is to be like, I'm not dealing with that. Well, some people's anyway. We're
yeah.
close on time, Michael. Can I please ask you for any thoughts or anything you want to weigh in on this? I don't feel like I left you a lot of space for that. I apologize.
Just what with the whole medical necessity, the situation that stood out for me. Um, you know,
Ooh,
what
that's a good word.
you know
Medical
what
necessity.
what is like the medical necessity of the situation. Um, so the dog, was pregnant, for 4 days, and Robin mentioned that that's not, a quote unquote typical,
Right.
standard of care. But you know, when I think of necessity, I guess I'm just thinking I honestly don't know the whole medical ethics, and
Yeah.
like specifics, but it was like a danger to the animal's life by
Hmm.
keeping it pregnant. Yes, there's distress, and we can just discuss,
Right.
like because that, but is there like a life or death kind of situation is what I was
Yeah.
kind of.
That's a
That's the
great
word I
point.
was missing, Michael. Yes, medical necessity. That's kind of, yes, that's right here. The owner or suffer should be reported. Yes, medical necessity. I would have come to that a lot quicker if I would have thought of that word, but that is the crystallizing part of this, right? Medical necessity.
Yeah.
Was the intent to, right? Or was it to really meet the medical necessity?
And something I want to like add just real quick. Wait, Robin, did you have something directly to reflect on what Robin said? No. Is just reminding ourselves that we only know what we know in the moment. I think that, we're taking the time and effort to be competent social workers, competency, that whole big, social work value. And that's something that I keep reflecting on. And what's been really being brought back to me again and again, like in supervision, is, you're putting the effort, you're taking the time to look at it. And, I'm not going to know everything. And I'm
Yeah.
not meant to know everything.
Yeah.
So,
That's a beautiful reflection. I appreciate you adding it. That's so smart.
yeah.
Wise.
Um, because something that I've been reflecting on is just self-compassion, and can is there any final thoughts or comments or insights that we want to share about Robin's situation real quick?
No, I'm ready to hear yours, Michael.
Okay, great. For me, I guess just bringing self-compassion into situations, something that I've been asking just in general, because I've been able to observe some animal assisted interventions at, my place of internship, is AIs like ethical? Are they ethical in the first
Hmm.
place? It's a very
So
just,
good.
basic, beginner, introductory question because I think that's, where we stop because I want to do less harm because I think the whole
Hmm.
no harm thing is not possible. Um, so I kind of wish that it would be reframed to, do less harm or, something, that recognizes that it's a gray area and that it's not like like black and white. Um,
Hmm.
um, you know, so I guess I think about how the animals are, have been donated to Hopewell.
Mhm.
for care. They're retired, horses and ponies, is my understanding, from, different situations. I think one or two might be a rescue, actually, now I think about it. I'll have to double check on that. But regardless, their, basic needs are being cared for, and that's great. So I think that there's, that ethical component that the animals are being taken care of, just in general. Um, and then, because I think sometimes with AIs, I think it's important that we're, making sure that, the welfare of the animals being taken care of, physically and emotionally. Um, I would say that, I have mixed feelings of having stalls,
Mm-hmm.
even just like going to Fieldstone, I feel a little, that they're in stalls and they can't just be, outside all the time, in the field,
Yeah.
and be able to roam as they want. Um, but also, I'm thinking about, um, I had opportunity in school to visit the Dene Nation and learn about, their some glimpse of their ways of things and philosophy and some cultural things that were going on, just like social issues that were going on. And one was that they have wild horses, and I can't remember the specifics on top of my head, but there was like this conflict of them like doing whatever they want and having an impact on the population. So how do we like live together, in a cohesive way?
Yeah.
So um, so I feel like there's these other like just general like human animal connections. Maybe that's a little too broad, focusing back into the AI specific. Um, I think that, the whole like time sessions, I think it was like 10 minutes or something was like a recommended guideline, like no more like than 10 minutes or something at a
Uh-huh.
time or something like that. I'll have to double check that. So it'll be a no for me. Um, but during the sessions, I think we get to see the clients have their emotions kind of be mirrored back to them. Is the one thing that I've noticed happen is that
Mm-hmm.
the clients are feeling anxious, sometimes the horses will respond to that. And then I'm asking, okay, so the horse knows this distress, so we're putting this distress on the horse. um,
Right.
but they're still able to, it seems, my assumption, to regulate and to be able to no, like I'm not noticing them like, like I don't feel like there's any like safety risk to the horse or the person. So that's one, I guess, standard I'm using.
Mm-hmm.
Um, anyway, that's my little blabble. Do any
Yeah.
guys have any thoughts or comments?
A million thoughts. I
But
love that you brought it down to like the bare bones, like is what we're kind of concentrate like one of the main
Mhm.
foundations of our work. Is it ethical? And you raise beautiful questions. I also have trouble with stalls. Like just thinking like, is this what you want, horse? You know what I mean? Like, I don't know. Um, and you're also speaking to something that I think is like very not sensational, but like boundary pushing, which and I agree with it, which is what is the non-hierarchical relationship between animals and humans, right? Which is like that's like a very strange idea to our culture because
Mhm.
we have this like idea of human dominance. And so kind of upending it into non-hierarchical is like a really exciting and interesting and compassionate place to try to make what you were talking about decisions about um is this ethical? I think that's beautiful. And then also something that the last thing I will say, well, I'll say two last things. Um no, I actually participated in an AAI activity last night. And something that was very stressed was like the animal's choice to interact. Which is easy when it's a horse, right? Because like horse is gonna take care of horse, and like horse is going to, if horse wants to move away from you, there's very little I can do to stop it. But that's not always the case. I mean, I have been in places where horses were sort of uh encouraged to participate in the work, even if it looked like maybe they didn't want to that day. And that didn't feel good. And the third thing I'll say is you're talking about the no harm versus reduce harm. And I think you're right. I love harm reduction as the goal for like everything we do. And it reminds me of I the the beneficence, right? How can I do the most good with the least amount of harm? And I use that 7 step ethical decision making, and that stood out very clearly to me, which is maximizing beneficence and minimizing harm, which is I think what you were talking to when you said it's not about saying no harm, because that's impossible.
Yeah, I
And
liked how you mentioned about like, horses will, set their boundaries.
Yeah.
They're very, clear in their boundaries. And I
Yeah.
mean, one thing that's like the little experience I've had with like leading horses, like when I was volunteering in Fieldstone, I like got a little experience of like leading the horse during like a group,
Mhm.
session is that, I was told like, you're the boss. They'll go where you go. And at the
Right.
same time, if they don't want to go somewhere, they won't. So it's both. So
Right.
I think like I was having that like internal conflict of like, in the moment of like, you know, who am I just like be telling the horse where to go? But I mean, one thing I can't remember all this is, but I think I like Fieldstone, they mentioned about like, this is like the horse's work, that I mean, even like, that one story about that horse that we learned about last semester in Dr. Vincent's class, where they would just naturally go up to people that seemed, in some kind of distress and would be able to provide, like emotional support for that. So there is this sense that like these animals, I think even like my, family cat, sometimes, yeah, I think she comes up and because she wants attention. And, I think sometimes when I'm feeling down, she notices and, love on me a little extra. Um,
Yeah.
maybe, maybe. So I think it's, because it's very like nonverbal, I think is like I tend to rely on like verbal communication because, we have these set definitions that, I say, hey, will you hand me that cup? You know exactly, what I'm talking about versus
Yeah.
like, like emotion could be, interpretable, you know. So I think it's for, a lesson for me to learn the nonverbal, language of animals and, you know, yeah.
Yeah. Totally. Totally. Thank you for bringing that. Robin, anything you want to add to that?
Michael, that is the probably the most emerging issue in AAIs, I think. So two things, one at Fieldstone, when I was working with Dr. Vincent at the study we were doing, one of the things that was a goal of the study was not just looking at what was the impact on the students, but she was one of the first to bring, we had worked with a team in Spain to develop a modified bit and it collected horse saliva to look at the cortisol levels,
Mm.
oxytocin, cortisol, that posts pre and post session, how
Mhm.
were the horses faring? And it turned out it was not, we had a pretty small sample size, but it turns out it was not negatively impacting the horses. I mean, overall. Um, and to your point of well, no, that is an emerging issue. People are now saying, wait, are AAIs ethical? Are we doing harm to the animals? Are we doing good for the kids or science, but harm to the animals? So you hit that on the head. I mean, we're worrying about that. We know now with all of our technology, we know that animals are sentient beings. So that's a huge concern. So, and I think the second thing of um, this hierarchical notion, maybe even using that with our clients,
Mm,
maybe just call that out, right? And
hmm.
say, like, traditionally, we have seen animals like this, humans, animals, right? But you're standing there in an arena and you've got this giant horse, right? And for all intents and purposes, now, if you're not a horse, I'm not a horse girl, right? I mean, I've worked with them a little, but not like Aviva or any of the other, handlers. So, for all intents and purposes, if you're not, in that arena, you feel like it's horse and person, right?
Yeah, that's
And
a
have that
great point.
to me, I don't know, maybe talking even about that out loud to clients, in that arena saying, typically this is how it's been, but maybe how do you feel in this arena, right? I'll never forget, I took my very first animal AAI class, and it was 30 young ladies. They were 21, all at OSU at Ohio State. She threw us into an arena with 6 horses, 12 of us in teams of two, threw leads in the middle and said, go catch your horse.
Hmm.
For someone who's not a horse person, you're like, what? Like, it's chaos, right? All you see is chaos. But again, it goes to Michael, where this is going is reading those cues of horse behavior and understanding where that horse is as you're approaching them. Are their ears back? They're fearful because they see you barreling towards them. So then we had to like regroup and be like, oh, we can't be stressed. Because then that horse's ears are back and they're like paw on the ground. Like if we're in pursuit of them, they know it. And just
Right.
reading those cues, oh my God, it's so essential. I don't think if you can't read the cues, and it's in dog therapy world, it's called active consent. Like the dog has to consent to participating in the therapy, or you don't work with them. They don't
Mm-hmm.
do that session.
Mm-hmm.
Like the best handlers will make sure that that dog gives consent. And there's like a whole list of ways you do that. But it is so front and center now, this notion, and people aren't talking about it enough. They're not. And I'll just go back to like, do they really want to be in a stall?
Yeah.
I'm sorry, but I just raising animals, right? And my cows, oh my God, they love my pasture. And at night we had to put them in because of predators. I mean,
Hmm.
mostly because our safety, we were worried about them. But do they want to be in a stall?
Yeah.
And I just think that word, that statement, and then this hierarchical thing that you point out is just think about the learning that goes on there, right? I mean,
Yeah.
holy moly, like it's like social work unfolds itself in that moment, right? When you're sitting in that arena with that horse and that client and the social worker, and
Yeah,
they're not horse people, it that unfolds in a whole different way. So,
for sure.
gosh, I hadn't thought about that in a while, Michael. Dang it. Dang it.
Great thoughts, everybody. We are very over time. And Lisa, I'm sorry if you got this far.
Well, she
Um,
probably stopped anyway at like
yeah,
whatever.
I hope so. But also really great conversation, everybody. I'm gonna stop recording now. A really good conversation.